Okay, hi all. Today we want to start the topic of compound interest. And while we're looking at compound interest, we're just going to have a quick look at a related topic, which is simple interest. Simple interest is something that you have probably learned in first year or even in primary school. So in order to help us along, we have a quick example here. And the example is in two parts. It's what will an investment rather of €5,000 amount to after 3 years if it offers 5% simple interest annually, or if it offers 5% interest compounded annually. Okay, so if we look at the first one first, the 5% simple interest annually. So first of all, there are a few terms we need to know. So principal is the name we give to the amount of the investment that you make, or alternatively for the amount of the loan that you get out. So the amount of money you borrow or the amount of money that you invest is known as the principal. The interest rate is the amount of interest that you earn if it's an investment, or the amount of interest that you have to, or the rate of interest that you have to pay if it's a loan that you're getting, and the interest itself is the actual amount of interest that you end up paying or earning. So the principal in this case, €5,000, that's how much you're investing. The interest rate is 5%, and again, it doesn't matter exactly how you calculate it, but I think it would be good if you got used to using decimals, because it makes the calculations quite quick and quite simple. So 5% as a decimal is 0.05, so multiplying 5,000 by 0.05 gives us €250 interest. Excuse me. So that's how much interest you would earn in 1 year, because it's the question says 5% simple interest annually, yearly. So if you earn 250 interest in 1 year, well, the way simple interest works is it's quite straightforward. Then if you invest the money for 3 years, you'll earn €250 each year. So 250s is €750. And then since the question was, what will the investment amount to after 3 years? Well, you'll have your €5,000 that you invested first day, plus the 750 that you earned, which gives you a total of 5,750 after the 3 years. Okay. So then the second part then is how much would the investment amount to if you were earning 5% interest and it was compounded annually? So compound interest we're talking about here, and this is not as straightforward. So let's look at it. With compound interest, we have two different methods we're going to look at calculating this. First of all, a longer type of method, and the second method is using a formula to do the same thing in a quicker way. So first of all, you're starting at the very beginning, at the start of the first year, you're investing €5,000. And if you want to know what you're going to have at the end of the year, we could multiply by the interest rate 5%, get 250, and then add it on to this 5,000 to know what you'll have at the end of the first year. But a quicker method, and a method that I think you should start getting used to certainly, is multiplying by 1.05. So in other words, 105%, because if you're going to earn 5% and you'll still have the 100%, at the end of the year you'll have 105%. So multiplying by 1.05 gives me 5,250, and that's what you have at the end of the first year. Now, whatever you have at the end of the first year is the same amount that you're going to have at the start of the second year. The reason being, I suppose, if you had €5,250 in your pocket at a minute to midnight on New Year's Eve, at a minute past midnight on the following year, or you would, at the start of the new year, if you like, you would have the same amount of money, wouldn't you? So whatever you have at the end of the first year is the same amount that you'll have at the start of the second year. So again, if you're starting with 5,250, if the interest rate is 5% per annum, and we're going to get 105% as a quick way, instead of working out what 5% of this is and adding it on, we'll end up with, at the end of year 2, 5,512.50. Now you can see already that the difference between this and the simple interest is that when we're calculating the interest in the following years after the first year. We're actually calculating 5% of the 5,000, but also 5% of the 250 of the interest that you earned in the first year. So you're compounding your interest is what we say. So the amount of interest that you earn, if you use compound interest to calculate your interest earned, is going to be greater than the amount of interest you would earn if you were using simple interest. Okay, so what you have at the end of year 2 should be exactly the same as what you have at the start of year 3, 5,512.50, multiplying that again by 1.05, in other words getting 105% of it, gives you 5,788.13 approximately, after having been rounded. And you can see, comparing, it's not a huge difference, 5,788, 5,750, but it's significant enough, and it just shows that compound interest will always earn you more than simple interest. So that's one method of calculating the total amount that you end up with after earning money at 5% per interest compounded annually. The second way I mentioned is if you use a formula which is in your log tables. It's the compound interest formula, and this is it here. F is equal to P times 1 plus I to the power of T. Okay, that's the formula. The formula is, or the letters in the formula, the variables stand for. F is the final amount, P is the principal, I is the interest rate, but it has to be in decimals. So if you're substituting in a value for I here and it's 5%, you cannot put in 5, it must be 0.05 or just 0.05, but it has to be decimal. And lastly, T stands for time, which is usually in years. I mean, if the compounding that you're doing, we can see here that the 5% interest is compounded annually. That means yearly. If the compounding is being done annually, then the T down here in the formula will be in years. If, for instance, which you wouldn't see very much at junior cycle level, but if it was 5% interest and it was compounded every month or something like that, then the T down here, the time, would have to be in months. But as I say, for all of the questions you would see, I would imagine it will be in years. So all it's a matter of doing then is, when we have our formula, subbing the information into the formula. So again, we see we have our formula here. F stands for the final amount. That's what we're looking for. What will the investment amount to after 3 years? P is the principal we said already, and principal we mentioned earlier is the amount that you invest. 1 is just the number 1. It's the same in all the formulas. Plus 0.5. No, that's incorrect, isn't it? Because that's 50% and 0.05. Which is the interest rate, 5% as a decimal. Let me just make that up better. And T is 3, because it's 3 years that you're investing for. And so again, if you just stick that whole thing into your calculator, you'll find that the final amount works out to be exactly the same as it worked out to be above, 5,788.13. The formula actually comes from, if we look at it very quickly, the formula is just a very quick way of doing the same calculations as up here. Okay, because up here you're multiplying the first bit by 1.05, then you're multiplying your answer by 1.05, then you're multiplying your answer by 1.05, and 1.05 by 1.05 by 1.05 is just 1.05 to be cubed, which is, you know, what you're putting in here, 1 plus 0.05, which is 1.05 to be cubed, multiplied by 5,000, the first multiplication up here. So you're doing the same thing, only much more quickly using a calculator. One or two other little things to mention here as well. The formula is definitely the best thing to do, or best thing to use when you're calculating final amounts or interest over a number of years, when the interest rate remains the same each year. So we can see it's 5% compounded annually here, so the formula will work. But if you get a question where it says in the first year they earn 5%, In the second year, it's 6%. In the third year, it's 9%. Well, then the formula is no good to you then, because you're going to have to work each of the years out separately. Okay, because in the formula, it will only take one interest rate. So when there are different interest rates for different years, the formula really isn't much help to you. That's one thing. Another thing, I suppose, that you really need to think about as well is when you're answering the questions about this, what students often get caught on is that the question will ask them either for the final amount, or it'll ask them how much interest was earned over the course of the 3 years. Now, the formula will always just calculate the final amount if you're given the information or the type of information that we were given there. So if the question had asked you what the total amount of interest that was earned over the 3 years is, you would have to do one other calculation. You'd have to take 5,000, what you started with, from 5,788.13, what you ended up with, to work out that you earned 788.13 in interest over the 3-year period. So the formula will find you the final amount, but you have to do one extra calculation to work out the interest.